Mr. Reyes. That was really, really touching. It's amazing, I think, that God has gifted each and every one of us with certain talents and passion, and be able to use those gifts from God is really, for His glory, is really great. The Church of Jesus, when Jesus built the church, the Bible says the gates of hell will not prevail, against the Church of God. Now, as you know, 2 weeks ago I attended this conference in Orlando, Florida. Around 2,600 pastors and church planters gathered. It's called Church Exponential. It's mostly evangelical churches. And one of the guest speakers during the main assembly spoke, and he began his message with a statement, "Good morning to everybody. I come from the future." So, wow, what an introduction, an alien from space or whatever. But then he said, "I came from Europe. And actually I'm Australian." His name is Michael Frost. Then he began to see that when he was there, actually he went to Hungary, when he was there and he was able to see with his own eyes the state of the church in Europe, where only around 2% of the population actually go to church. And it's going down. And the same thing with Australia. And the reason he said why he said, "Behold, I come from the future," is because he's saying that if Christians in the United States won't really do their part, if they do as Europeans are, that is the future of the church, where churches are going less and less impact to neighborhood. As I was saying a while ago, the city manager says, "I don't see any difference between a Christian neighbor or a non-Christian neighbor." That's basically the assessment. And it's kind of alarming. And then he also mentioned that there's a number of cathedrals in Europe that are now being sold, and they're being converted to malls. That's, shopping malls. And I know that there was a time when we were looking for a church place ourselves. We were looking for some places to meet in this area in LA. There were a few cathedrals that I went to, like seating capacity, like 2,000, 3,000, church attendance, 35. And sometimes there are Christians who say, "I don't think God is going to allow, that the church in the United States is going to collapse." No, God won't let that happen. He won't let churches to close down. When we look at history, churches do close down. There were times when we look at the history of the church, there were times when, for example, where Turkey is now, Asia Minor, Philippi, Colossia, and a lot of these churches were Christians, they're there. There was a time when Egypt was mostly Christian, Northern Africa. But now you look at those areas, where are the Christians? They're decreasing in number. Churches can close down. The church here in the United States can go down if we don't do much of it. And so difficult, and we ask the question, and I think it's a valid question, what do we do as Christians when you talk about your faith in the office and people laugh and mock at you like you're an exile, you're a pilgrim, you're a foreigner. You hear them on television when people and politicians and celebrities mock at Christianity. Even in universities these days, if you're a professor, you can talk freely about your faith, whether Muslim or Buddhist or you're an atheist. Nobody complains about it. But if you are a professor in a university, secular university, and you talk about Christianity, boo! It's not popular. I remember my daughter, when she was in high school, she had an assignment in English, right here at PHS, Pasadena High School, public school, and she gave a report on abortion. Being a Christian, she was saying all of the things that are wrong about abortion. But as she was starting the talk, everybody in her class were drowning her with boo, boo. She can't even continue in talking about it, and the sad part is that the teacher didn't really do much. And that's where it is. So even in this country, the tendencies for the church, as you know, I don't have to tell you, you see it yourself, right? And then our kids are being assimilated in the society. That's a problem, is that the society is becoming so strong and so impactful that the young people are even scared and afraid of declaring their faith. And that's what's happening. We're being assimilated slowly, and we don't even realize it. It's like, what's that movie, the Star Trek, the Borg, we will assimilate you. There's futility. Resistance is futile. We will assimilate you. It's almost like, are we in this Borg country where resistance is futile and we'll get assimilated? I hope not. So today I just want to share with you, the title is Christian Exiles, because more and more Christians are beginning to be like exiles. In fact, even during the time of the New Testament times, during the time of Jesus, the disciples, they felt that way. Christians, they get persecuted. They feel like exiles, especially under a foreign Roman Empire, and then even the religious leaders, the Sanhedrin, and all those guys, Pharisees, Sadducees. It's difficult to be a Christian. You get alienated. You feel like an exile. But we can learn, I believe, we can learn from the story of the Jewish exiles. And the question is, for those people, is how did they behave and what did they do that they were able to preserve the Jewish faith, their faith, and continue on through the years and hundreds of years? What was it that they did? And from the principle, from what they did, I think we can learn some examples. We can learn for ourselves what they do. So I'm going to share you four things that they did. One is, let me just summarize quickly now, dangerous stories. And I'll explain what it is. Two is commitment, dangerous commitment to the society. Being committed to the society. The other one is dangerous critique, to the culture. And fourth is worship, gathering together to worship. So those people, if I start with the other one, dangerous stories, is that during those years, as the Jews were taken by Babylon, and the Jewish leaders, of course, because the Babylonian Empire's policy was to grab all the people, take them to your empire, and then assimilate them. You want them to become Babylonians. I mean, in each way, even religion and faith. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel, that these people have to be assimilated and everything. So something has got to be done. And one of the things that the Jewish leaders did at the time was to retell their stories. What was the story that, so they began to make sure that the next generation knows about the story of the Exodus. So they have to tell these stories to their families, retell the stories. And then when the next generation comes, they know about Moses, they know about Joseph and Abraham, they know about David. Keep telling the story. And these stories really excites the young generation and the younger generation that we have an identity. It's not that we're lost and we're immigrants or slaves or exiles, we don't know who we are. We know who we are. We know that in this story, we are God's people. That God has never left us or forsaken us. Even we are in exile, we have a God. And our God is sovereign. We've seen the stories of Gideon, where Gideon and the judges rose up. You've seen the story of Moses, when other nations, other gods try to claim their gods, but they're only idols made of wood and so forth. But our God is the sovereign God. When we are people in exile, that's the thing that we need to declare. We have the real, only true God. And that's what's happening even today. There's so many other sources here, philosophy and education and government and everything, trying to declare that they are the ones that has the power, but we know better. We have a story. And for us Christians, we have a better story. In fact, we have a better story than the Jews. We have the story of Jesus. The story of His incarnation. God becoming man. I don't have to go through this, just kind of summarizing it to you for time. We have that. And so we have to retell the story. That's why, at the beginning of, if you remember, at the beginning of this year, remember I gave like 5, challenges for us. One of them is to read the stories of the Bible, read the Bible. As a church, to be able to preserve our faith, to be able to pass the baton to the next generation, the thing that we should do is tell our story. The story of Jesus on the cross. Because the story of Jesus goes against the stories that we hear in the world today, against our culture. The story of Jesus is about sacrifice. It's about a person who gives his life. It's a story about generosity. It's about compassion. It's about giving. It's about reaching out. Out there in the world, it's a story about selfishness. The American dream is about getting as much for myself. There's that. It goes against the economics of today's world. The economics of the kingdom of God are totally different when we see the story of Jesus. So telling the story. That's why we take the communion every month, because that is a part of the story. And we should never lose that. And that's the thing that we should tell the story when we talk to people. If the only things they hear about our stories were, oh yeah, my story, I remember the time when I was attending the Feast of Tabernacles, I was, all these stories, I remember the time when we were doing this. I mean, if they're just local and they're not really, they don't really unite us, and give us a more permanent, true identity in God, it won't work. So the story that we should have is the story of Jesus. So living, that's what's happening. We're living as exiles. We're being assimilated. And the first thing that we need to do is, so as not to be assimilated, let us keep that story. The story of Jesus, retell it. And we can also talk about even the Old Testament stories, because they are a part of our life story. Because the church is even in the church, in the wilderness, that's how it is. So the exiles have to retell. So read the Bible. Let's go to Jeremiah 54 and 5. Jeremiah chapter 50, verses 4 and 5. Jeremiah after Isaiah. Jeremiah 50, verse 4 and 5. In those days, and in that time, says the Lord, the children of Israel shall come. In those days at that time, declares the Lord, the people of Israel and the people of Judah together will go in tears to seek the Lord their God. Verse 5. They will ask the way to Zion and turn their faces toward it. They will come and bind themselves to the Lord in an everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten. So the people of exiles, those people always find ways to be together. And what do? They talk. They meet in homes. They meet in synagogues. That's what they do. So that they can, not just to be nostalgic about the past, but stories, when we go and do them and talk about them, declare that our God reigns. That's what it is. That is what is important in this culture. The story is that there is a God who reigns. And this God is not just all-powerful, but He's the source of all love and care. He's one that invites each of us, humanity, into that love relationship. The stories. And so the life story of Jesus goes so against this American dream, the Chinese, whatever philosophy, communism, and against humanism, and against selfishness, and against greed. Because in these stories, we see the gospel. We see God for who He is, His way of life in these stories. So they're good. So let's keep that up with telling stories. God becoming human is a wonderful. There's no other story that can be compared to the story of Jesus becoming human. And there He was, perfect without sin, and becoming a part of the Jewish community, sinful society. And Jesus, not only being missional from heaven, He came down on earth. He was also incarnational, meaning He became one of us. That's what Jesus did. And we can see that too, that how did God, who is so pure, so holy, and then decided to be living among humans that live in sin? How did He react? There are two ways probably we might think that He would react, where people might think that they're holy and righteous, would say, I'm going to separate myself from this evil society because I'm holy, I'm pure, I don't want to be dirtied by the sin and so forth, so let me build a fortress and be separate, totally. Jesus didn't do that. He went to the people. He went to this Samaritan woman. He went to this leper. He went to the sinful people. And that's why they were even accusing Jesus. You must be a sinner. You are with the publicans. You're a wine bibber. You must have the demon. All this accusation, because Jesus is this holy person, this holy man. 100% man, 100% God, became a part. He didn't separate himself from the society. Now another reaction could be, from others, I hate this society, I'm going to go against it, I'm going to raise this military group and I'm going to overthrow the Roman Empire and so forth, I'm going to be a critic, all of this. No, Jesus didn't do that. What did Jesus do? Instead, Jesus went to the neighbors, to the community, and served. And genuinely loved people. Genuinely loved people. So we can picture Jesus here. That's how he behaved. That's how he lived his life. He listened. He served. He loved. I think that's what Jesus, who is in you and in me, that's what he is doing today. That's how he would go to the neighborhood. He would do that. So point number 2 is, okay, we're telling these dangerous stories that maybe dangerous because they're against the society. 2 is, we have this commitment. The people of God are committed to this society that is probably over them, whatever empire, in serving them. There are people who even rose in rank. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel, there are people who rose in rank. They're very much actively involved. Nehemiah, these people were doing their duty as Christians. They're not all about anti-this, anti-that, and anti-this. No, they're recognized as genuinely, they're people, though they may be captives, but they care about people. That will be so beautiful if we Christians are known for that. That alone is good. That, my neighbor, John, good man, good lady, whoever we are, to be known and to be committed. That's one thing we see here that the exiles did themselves. We are called, and like Christ, to be godly, but we are expected to live fully, this godly life expressed in love. It is authentic. So that's something I feel that I need to do for myself. And I live in a neighborhood, and there are times, a few years ago, where I drive out of a driveway and people are selling drugs right in front of it, God, I pray that you really give me genuine love for this, neighbor of mine, to really love them. And I know it's dangerous too. There are times when there's some danger in it, but Jesus Christ, even the apostles did the same, and they were not afraid. So that's the exiles had this promise, this commitment for the empire. That's what they did. Christian movement. It's a movement. We are not just an institution as a church. We are a movement. We're a living, breathing group of people who truly cares, just as Jesus cares for the people. That is, for others, that is a threat. They don't like it. That's probably troubling because we are showing to the world that, hey, Christians care, against consumerism, against selfishness and greed. We're showing to the society that there is a better way than just greed. That's the trouble in our economy today, because greed prevails. And the more the economy gets less and less for people, the more they become greedy and selfish. But not for the church. The church, we find ways to serve our neighbors. So we have to listen more. There's a story of this missionaries who went to India years ago. They were able to raise millions, and they wanted to build hospitals. Before even going to India, they wanted to build these hospitals. They're in a medical mission. So they went to this province with a lot of the poor people in India, and they were talking to the tribal leaders, and were telling them that they wanted to really help them. And they asked them, what can we do to help you? And the tribal leader says, give us post office box. Yeah? Huh? These people don't know what they want. No, we want to give you a hospital. We'll provide you good doctors. Give us post office box. Yeah? No. We want to build you hospitals and give you this medical, all these plans that they have. But these leaders keep saying, post office box. So they were really intrigued, and they said, maybe we should listen. Let's really listen to these people. So they listened, and they found out that if you don't have an address in that part of the country, you have no identity. And if you don't have any identity, you have no access to a lot of other services. You can't go to school, you can't go to this other, services the government. I mean, you're homeless. You don't have identity, and so that to them that's where it begins. I must have an identity. I must have an address, a post box. You know what I mean? And so these missionaries tried to help, and they were surprised. It took them 2 years to be able to give these families what they wanted. It was more difficult than building a hospital in that society. So the lesson that I heard from that is that oftentimes we Christians, we have this quick answer and quick solution, but really, Christians, let's listen more. Listen a lot. Then if you really want to reach people, a lot of times, and I'm guilty, years ago, people invite me, some unconverted, non-believing relatives. Hey, Bermie, we're going to have this party. No. Hey, Bermie, high school friends say, we have to go to this gathering. No. Parent teachers, I said, oh, we have this meeting. No. I was building this institution, and I was inside this big wall, and that's all wrong, and we have to be missional. And so I suggest to all of us, say more yes. The opportunity to be able to really touch people's lives, to be with them. Because if we're only talking to people of faith, how can we ever share our faith to non-Christians, right? And then, of course, listen. Just be a friend. Build good relationships. Be a friend. As I was mentioning, I was distributing that handout, building blocks, you in the center. Start with the neighborhood. Do you even know, do I know their names? Career, what are their stories? Just listen. So there's no burden for you. I'm afraid because I have to share Jesus. And, don't think about that yet, right? Because there are times it takes trust and build relationships so that, because if you're not careful and then you cram religion quickly, down their throat, they build a wall and you can't reach them. So just as Jesus did, build relationship, reach out. He went, John 4, to the Samaritan woman where the disciples were upset, but Jesus did anyway and related to this lady, this woman. I think that's something that we can do. So that's the second one. The second one is, as exiles in this Babylonian system or empire, let us have a promise that we strive not to be the best church in the city, but to be the best church for the city. That we can make an impact, or even in the neighborhood. Now, if you move out of your house, will your neighbors feel it? Now, assuming you're there, if you move residence, will they even know it? Some of these people are giving their testimonies when they were doing this building blocks in Colorado system. People didn't realize, oh, I didn't know you've been here for 15 years. I thought you just arrived, People are realizing that they've been there and they don't know each other and so forth, but it's good. Let's take baby steps perhaps, but get to know. I really salute some of you guys here. Some of you are doing that already, So that's wonderful. So let's be committed to serving, not marginalizing the poor, but even serving them, serving people genuinely. Let's be a companion not only for each other, but a companion to our neighbors. The word companion, I think Latin it means, Pastor Michael tell me, companion, meaning with, and pan comes from the word bread. Companions originally it means people with bread. That's what it is. With bread. So to be a companion, we are known to be ones who have the bread. And we give bread to them. course, you know where I'm going, right? About the bread now. As Christians, we are spiritual companions because we have the living bread. So we are not only known to be companions in a physical way with bread to our neighbors, but when time and God allows it, when the door is open and with God's helping us, we share the bread of life to our neighbors to become real companion. So Christian movement, this is where our church is going. We're not contented with being an institution or a fortress. We are going to be a movement for Jesus Christ. That's what's going to happen from this day on, moving forward. We're going to be a movement. We're going to be not only trying to attract people, but also I pray that we become missional, incarnational, not just as a church and wait for the church to do its own thing, but as individuals. The Bible does even say in the New Testament, "Lo, you are a royal priesthood," right? We are a royal priesthood. We are a priesthood of believers. So in some ways we have this priestly kind of duty. Jesus Christ is doing the work. It is His ministry, not our ministry. But Jesus Christ, the high priest, is doing this priestly work of going to the communities and helping. And so we participate with our high priest, and we kind of represent God. We are companions to them and reach out to our community. That's what we do. Ephesians 4, verse 28. Ephesians 4, verse 28. Ephesians 4. Otto is quicker than me turning the Bible here, so let me just read that. He who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work. Whoa! The Bible says we should find work. We should work. Work is we're commanded to work. Don't steal. It's not enough to say, I'm a good Christian, because how are you good? I don't steal. You know what I mean? If God says, I want you to go, one step further. Work instead. But then why does God want us to work? But must work, doing something useful with his own hands, that he may have something to share with those in need, to be a companion, to be one with bread, to share. That's our commitment to the society. So we are exiles in some ways, but we are committed to the society. I don't have to go to Galatians 2:20. Jesus Christ, is the one that does that. So the challenge is that let's build relationships. Let's show to this world, this system, that Christianity is a better way. That in Christianity, the giving, the love way, the sacrificing way, the generous way is much better than greed. So let's say yes more often to invitations, but be wise, of course. If your neighbor is an axe murderer, be careful. You can pray, You know what I mean? Don't still be careful. Listen, be generous. It's a heart issue, man. Now, if we want the world to follow the way of Jesus, shouldn't we begin with showing the way of Jesus in the way we live? That we ourselves are missional, incarnational. That's how it is. So it begins. We need to preach the gospel to ourselves first. Yes. To live the gospel ourselves before we can tell them, let me tell you about the gospel. First thing first is that you tell me, the gospel. Do I live it? That's the first thing we ask. Okay, now the third thing that the exiles did is they're also a critic. Now, this is something that lots of you probably like. Critic to the society. Dangerous criticism. That there are times when the exiles were put to a position where they have to choose between their faith or the system. There's a line drawn. There's a point. Because the society, the system's goal is to assimilate you. The goal of the enemy is to assimilate us. So there's a point in time when we must resist assimilation. So the Star Trek people said, no, we will not get assimilated, by the Borg. The Bible says, come out of her, my people, Revelation 18, verse 1 to 5, because it talks about the system of the world is like a Babylonian system as in the exile, representing idolatry, confusion, and all the wrong things against God. So they must resist and refuse, to be assimilated. And so it happened with Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Remember, they were, probably up-and-coming future managers of Babylonian Empire. And then Daniel, who rose like third in rank. He served Nebuchadnezzar. And then after Nebuchadnezzar, he served Belshazzar. Was it Belteshazzar? Whichever, And then afterwards, Darius. 3 leaders. Daniel was there. It's amazing. He's a person of God. But in all of this, as he has this promise or commitment to serving humanity, he also will not compromise his faith to the extent that even with Darius, he would not. He was thrown to the lion's den, and Daniel held on to his critique of the faith and customs. He would not bow down. And so should we do also like Daniel. We will not bow down to the system of this world. This world that will keep on saying that this world